Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you could all make it here today. And my name is Amna Ishaq. I am an advisory council member for Minaret Foundation, and I work at An-Nisa Hope Center as a licensed social worker and therapist. And I'm also on the Fort Bend District Attorney's Office Community Engagement Committee. So today we are going to be talking about, we're all here. We have an esteemed group of panelists, and we're going to be talking about how to be with one another during this time, during this pandemic. And you know, we have so many different people that are going through a lot right now. And this webinar is going to focus on how we can be there for one another, how marginalized communities can come together and be there for one another, especially with the rhetoric that's going on. Just yesterday, our administration was perpetuating the rhetoric of xenophobia as well. He was talking about how Nancy Pelosi was dancing in Chinatown when she heard about COVID-19, basically saying that he's taking it more seriously than our other Democratic counterparts. But this kind of rhetoric is what's going to cause hate and division in our community. And that's why we have this esteemed group of panelists that are going to be here to talk about how we can join our forces together and how we can become one and how we can support one another against xenophobia. And for those of you who don't know what xenophobia is, it's anti-Chinese sentiment against its people, against people of Chinese descent, Chinese culture. And all of the people that we have today, they are people in our community. They are advocates in our community fighting against hate, fighting against marginalization of diverse communities. And that's why I want them to talk, and they're going to share with us their tidbits and their knowledge on how we can join together and how a strong intersectionality can bring us all together and we can fight against the forces that are trying to oppress us and divide us. So today we have Stephen Wu. Stephen Wu is in his professional capacity, he is a facilities engineer at Chevron. In his advocacy capacity, Stephen currently serves on the board of directors for the East Coast Asian American Student Union and a board member of OCA Greater Houston. We have Marjorie. She's a graduate of Pennsylvania State University with a BA in political science, a native New Yorker who recently relocated from Los Angeles to Houston. She currently serves as the coordinator for the Houston Coalition Against Hate. And then we have Deena Marks. And Deena Marks is the associate director for the Southwest Regional Office of the Anti-Defamation League, or for short, the ADL. Her work in Houston ranges from training foreign consulates on how to address hate to educating law enforcement on extremist groups and their histories. She actually came to one of our programs last year as well with the DA's office in Fort Bend County, and she was amazing. She shared her insight on a lot of things, and we're so happy that you're here too. And then we also have Sharik Abdul Ghani. He is the director of Minaret Foundation. For the past 10 years, Sharik has regularly spoken at faith centers, conferences, and educational institutions on topics ranging from the American Muslim identity to faith-based activism and spirituality. And I've had the honor to work with Sharik for the past several years as being the interfaith director at Maryam Islamic Center, and he has been my go-to for anything interfaith, and he really cares a lot about this community, and I'm so proud to be a part of this organization. Sharik has regularly spoken at faith centers, conferences, and education. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead, and I just have some questions that I want to ask y'all. We're just going to have a conversation because we do need to talk about this rhetoric that's going around and how we can come together. So can each of you, before we do that, I just want each of you to take a minute to tell us about your organizations and what you do for your organizations. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to Marjorie.
Okay. So I am actually the executive director of Houston Coalition Against Hate. We are a coalition, a collaborative of different organizations and institutions in Houston that have come together to address all hate, bias, violence, and discrimination. I'm happy to say that ADL and Deena Marks and also OCA, Stephen Wu, have been a part of our coalition. We have upwards of almost 70 members now who are part of the coalition. And for more information, you can go to houstonagainst.hate.org.
just unmuted myself. Okay, so okay, so now please, Deena, please tell us more about the ADL and what y'all do and how y'all are with diverse communities and how y'all help us.
Well, simply put, ADL is an anti-hate organization. We fight hate against all people. Started out as a Jewish organization, but almost immediately our founders determined you can't fight one hate without fighting other types of hate. And I'm really, really pleased to be together with my friends here today because, as you pointed out, Amina, it is so important for us not to be divided, but to work together to fight hatred. It's great to be a part of the Houston Coalition Against Hate and work with Marjorie and Stephen. And we've worked with Shart for a long time too. And he's our go-to on so many of the things we do. So, but ADL just fights hate in many different ways. We work with law enforcement. We strengthen hate crime laws. We encourage people to report hate incidents and hate crimes. And we work with other like organizations to make sure both proactively and reactively. We have lots of educational programs. Hate is addressed, and we try to stop hate before it gets to the point where it's violent and extremely hurtful.
Thank you so much, Deena. I love the ADL. We work a lot with them, and I appreciate all the work you're doing. Okay, so Stephen, please tell us about the OCA.
Yeah, so OCA Greater Houston is a social advocacy organization dedicated in advancing the social, political, and economic well-being of Asian American and Pacific Islanders. We were founded in 1979, and throughout the years till now, we've had a long history of defending Asian American and Pacific Islanders against discrimination of all kinds, whether it's employment. There were instances back in the 70s and 80s and 90s with NASA in the oil and gas sector with firing of folks who were predominantly, Asian American, and we, fought alongside with those folks to make sure that they were represented best. And of course, hate crimes to this day. Obviously, COVID-19 has spread not only the virus, but also a lot of xenophobia and racism. And we've seen the rise against specifically East and Southeast Asians in this country and across the whole world. I think as of last week or so, there's like 3 or 4 hate crime trackers on this specifically, and there was over 1,500 plus reported cases. And that's something that, we're still trying to figure out what's the best way to address these things in a way that, as I'm sure we're going to talk, in a very solidarity manner, because these issues, while they might be different depending on the different groups of people, it's all very similarly rooted in a lot of ways. And I think that's an opportunity for us to work hopefully better together moving forward.
Definitely, Stephen. And that's why intersectionality is so important. That's why it's so important for us all to get together and talk about this and talk about how scapegoating communities, diverse communities, is one and the same. In essence, like when you do it to one person, one community, it starts going to another community, and that's what we're seeing in our country right now. And that kind of leads into my next question to y'all. Obviously it's a distraction. I do believe that the federal government and people in this administration are trying to distract us by this scapegoating, but what are some other, why else would people want to scapegoat different communities? And how does it all come together? Please tell me, Marjorie.
So tell me what you mean when you say scapegoat. Blame other communities?
Yes. So we know that we do know that the federal government, a lot of people, not just the government, there's a lot of people just trying to, they're picking on a community to scapegoat them, to attack them, maybe to cause divisiveness. So we do know that it's a distraction tactic sometimes to not blame themselves for what they may have done wrong. So can you tell me what are some other reasons why people would want to scapegoat a community?
Well, I think Stephen touched on it earlier. We know that we're dealing with racism and systemic oppression in the United States. And so I think what we're starting to see now is how it's trickling out into different ethnic groups. I think also, religiously, the Muslims have been victims, Jews have been victims for a lot of hate incidents. I think Deena can speak more about her community and what ADL is doing around that. So for me, it's not a surprise that this is happening. This is what the work is built around. This is what the coalition is built around, is trying to help other organizations and institutions in Houston navigate these issues and to help capacity building and to do research so that we start to have data around this so that it can start to inform the work that we do moving forward.
Yes, definitely. Okay. So also, so Stephen, what do you think this does? Like when you start scapegoating a community and marginalizing different communities, what do you think that it, like, what has it been doing to our organizations that are working so hard against this, against fighting hate? And how do you think what does it do to the communities or the advocates that are out there fighting on the ground?
Well, first of all, I'm apologizing for the lawnmower outside. But I think specifically to organizations, it's making the efforts, especially for, I guess, more Asian American organizations, it's almost a double-edged sword where we want to go out and help support our communities who are going through these crimes, hate crimes or discrimination. But in itself, we are potentially the victims as well, since, I guess one personal example for me is, this is like the first time where I've had to tell my parents, even when you go grocery shopping, you have to be more vigilant. And I've never told them that before. And I think even for organizations who want to go out to, let's say, check up on seniors who are more vulnerable and may need folks to deliver groceries, or, people who are going to, let's say, the Houston Food Bank and getting things, they themselves now have to be more wary of potentially being profiled and then potentially being attacked. And we've seen some pretty brutal examples with New York. There was just a lady who was going out to, take out her trash, and then someone with acid just poured it on her. We've seen the Midland attack at a Walmart shopping center. And I think something even more heartbreaking is how it's affecting the youth, the folks who are just young and naive and not really understanding how their words are impacting people. There's a 12-year-old girl, I believe, who wrote a letter, like literally wrote a letter and said, I don't understand why on this video chat, my friend was saying, it's your fault. It's the Chinese people who are causing this. I thought we were friends, and what you're saying is extremely hurtful for me. And I have a little brother. He's in high school, and for me, the other impact is, how is this affecting the younger folks, and will they carry the same mentality moving forward when they grow up? I hope not, but that's another thing that we have to think about.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Stephen, for telling us about just sharing your insight and sharing with us different stories, because you're right. It's in high schools and schools, it's going to be a problem too. Kids are going to be going back in August, hopefully. And my son as well, he has, he's been scapegoated. He's been called a lot of things for being Muslim because he's a very proud Muslim. So I totally understand where you're coming from, Stephen. And it is something that we're going to have to talk to our children about. We're going to have to talk to our siblings about, and it's going to be a tough conversation, but we have to do that. So Deena,
can I ask Stephen a quick question? Actually, Stephen, what you just said, that you have to tell your mom to be more cognizant when she goes into the grocery store. That's something that I think Muslim women especially, I mean, if you look at Amna, she looks pretty obviously Muslim, or she's really cold. Something's going on here. But when my mom or my sisters walk into an HEB, this is something that's already in the back of their mind. I don't want to say this fear is ingrained, but this thought is ingrained in the back of their mind that, hey, anything could happen. Be ready, or, just be careful, be watchful. And it's just something, it's not like a chip on people's shoulder, but it's just, we're just more aware that we stand out, or we're extremely visible. Like, how does that change your mom's perception of going out in public?
That's a good question. For her personally, I think it's, so my mom and my dad, they immigrated to this country. So I'm second generation, their first generation. I think for a lot of first generation folks who come to this country, they have a very rosy image of what America is and what the hopes and dreams can be. And a lot of it is valid. You know, if you put in the work, you're going to get rewarded for that. But they don't also understand the other side of our history with race, with hate crime. They don't understand the, I guess, dynamics that have been existing here for quite some time. So once like this has happened, this is, I think, probably the first instance where it's on a national scale, and they're noticing like, wow, okay, we definitely aren't as safe as we thought we were. And I think this is another topic that we in the Asian American community talk a lot about, which is the model minority myth, where we've always assumed, at least some of us have assumed, because we are who we are, we are not like, we are almost like protected against some of these issues that other communities of color go through. And it's absolutely not true. I mean, number one, if you look at Asian Americans, it's a huge group of people with different cultures and different backgrounds. And a lot of other groups, including like South Asians and Southeast Asians, have already gone through many, many things before. It's now where newer generation East Asian Americans, I think, have now begun to realize like this issue. I mean, but if, again, history is important too. East Asians have faced this too before with the Yellow Peril back in the late 1800s and early 1900s with extremely aggressive immigration laws and just discrimination against us in general. But as new waves come through, they don't understand that past, and thus they have a different image of what the US is. So this is, for them, for this new group, what's happening now is like a wake-up call to them for sure.
Thanks.
So much, Stephen. Thank you so much. That's so true. I've actually talked about this with so many people about the model minority myth, and it's like that with a lot of Muslim communities as well as and South Asians like Indians and Pakistanis. And I think Asian Americans in general, we do have that. We're trying a lot of times that the generation before us or the immigrants that have come, they've trying to fit that mold of being that model minority. And I totally agree with you on that, Stephen. And that's why it's so important for us to do things like this to bring awareness to our communities. But you know, like in the past, we see that this administration and other administrations too, how they have been scapegoating so many different communities. Like first it was Hispanics, right? And then it went to Muslims, then it went, and with the Jewish community, it's a historical, it's historically, they've been, anti-Semitism has been there for so long. So there's so many different communities, and African Americans, you know, in this country, racism, it was built on it, right? So just looking at what our administration has been doing, who do y'all think is going to be the next? Like right now it's Chinese Americans of Chinese descent. Who do you think is going to be blamed next? Who do you think is going to be scapegoated by this administration, or even maybe next administration? Who do you think is going to be, which community do you think is going to be scapegoated next? Any of you can take it. Deena, how about you? Please let us know. Talk to us.
I think it all depends on circumstances. If you see what's going on now, we're in a crisis. Everybody's in a crisis. It's a situation that those of us who are alive now, most of us who are alive now, have never faced before, because we're being asked to work together by being apart. So it's a very unusual situation. But no matter what, when there is something that goes wrong in this country, say we're down on our luck economically, or in a situation like this where there is a health threat, somebody's always looking for someone to blame. And I think it just depends on the circumstances. And sometimes it's the group that's come to this country most recently. With immigration, that seems to be the case, you know, and nobody's been immune from that. So I think the only way to predict that is to know what's going to happen in the future. But somebody's going to be blamed no matter what. We just have to work together to try to prevent it and to respond to it. And unfortunately, while we're all apart, we can't really do what we need to do to make sure that everybody gets along, which is to get to know each other better face to face.
Yeah.
So we can try to work on that a little bit through our technology. Thank goodness we have this technology that can help us do that now.
Deena, in your experience studying extremism, studying hate, are there any outlying indicators where we can see that maybe those in power or maybe those with authority or those with a microphone, are there any indicators that show that, okay, the process of blaming one community, it's not really working out, let's start shifting like the eye of Sauron onto another community? Like,
that's such a good question, Shark, and absolutely yes. Haters are very opportunistic. And the same haters who have been blaming Jews and scapegoating Muslims and scapegoating people who've come to this country from Latin America for the past few years or centuries have taken this pandemic and now they've turned to other people to try to scapegoat them, the Asian community. So yes, the answer to your question is absolutely, unequivocally yes.
can I ask you a follow-up question real quick? Sorry, Amna. I've been seeing a lot about the African American community in the news lately, how cases of corona keep going up in the African American community. It's like, why are you just focusing on the African? And I keep seeing this in the media, whether it be CNN, Fox, ABC, even on local stations. Now, I understand that cases of corona are going up in the African American community. I see the data is there, but why aren't we focusing on why? The systemic issues that is causing this to happen in the first place, instead of just saying, well, Black people are more susceptible to coronavirus, because that sends one message. And so is this an indicator that maybe like we're going to start looking at the Latinos and our African American brothers and sisters a little bit more?
Yeah, it's another way of scapegoating.
Yeah, and there have been people who've been talking about it. There were at least 2 editorials in the Houston Chronicle about the inordinate amount of cases in the Black community compared to the percentage of African Americans in the population. But they also, in those particular editorials, talked about reasons for that. Inequities in our medical care. They talked about that. They talked about jobs, traditional jobs, and why those might make certain groups more susceptible to the contagion of the disease. And they also called for people to speak out, just like you did, about these inequities and some of the things, systemic things that are creating more vulnerabilities, if you will. So there are people and groups who are talking about this, and it just needs to be talked about more.
Thank you.
Can I add to that? I mean,
Yes.
yeah, I think the point you make is great. It's that people really don't want to look at it and don't want to look at what this country was founded on and deal with it, because it's going to require systems to be changed, quite honestly. And there are many traditionalists that don't want to see systems changed. And so, I think the coalition is hoping to have really honest conversations around these issues, and really hoping that the different organizations and institutions that come together, that we're stronger together, that we can have these honest conversations together, and that we can start with ourselves and start with our organizations and our institutions, and that there'll be some sort of ripple effect that can happen.
Okay. Yes, totally. I agree. And thank you so much, Marjorie and Deena. But also I want to go ahead and ask you all, what other, like Stephen had talked about scapegoating with what's going on with COVID-19 right now with Corona. But can Deena or Marjorie, can you tell us anything that y'all have seen in your organizations? Anybody has come to y'all, any other type of scapegoating that may be happening in different communities, or also like what the ADL, have y'all seen a spike in reporting or anything? Please let us know, like what have y'all seen in your organizations regarding scapegoating revolving around COVID-19?
Well, we've seen, yes, a definite spike in incidents. Not as much of a spike in reporting of incidents as we'd like to see. We'd like for more people to report, because I think what's been reported is just the tip of the iceberg. Stephen mentioned some of OCA's statistics. I spoke to someone from OCA who, as of last week, said there were 1,640 hate incidents against Asians reported in this country. And that has got to just be the tip of the iceberg. Only 44 of those were reported to ADL. We have reporting places where you can report. I know that OCA's is www.aapihatecrimes.org. So that's one place that you can report incidents. ADL has one, adl.org/report incident. This information is very important because it helps us see what's going on. It helps law enforcement officials see trends and maybe preempt something really bad that's about to happen, like the man who was going to the hospital in Kansas City to blow it up. The FBI caught him before he did that, and his animus was against the Jews. He blamed Jews for creating the virus because he said they wanted to control the world. So there has been a big spike in reports, but we need to know more about what's going on, and we need to address these reports directly.
That's totally, yes, I totally agree. And also I wanted to add on that, you know, in Asian Americans, that model minority myth does play such a huge role in why many don't report. So how can we make it easier for these communities, especially maybe this generation, the younger generation, probably they're stronger, and they, in that sense, that they'll report it, or they may not, because they've been ingrained with that model minority myth from their parents. But how do we fight that? How do we help them report something like that? Because a lot of times it's very difficult for Asian Americans, especially since I'm speaking for myself too. I'm a South Asian, and but just that, how do we cross that? How do you help those communities come out and report it to the ADL? I know they have a forum online, but doing that goes against what they've been trained to do, right? We're going to stay good. We're going to be good, and you know, it'll all pass. But how do we break that cycle, and how do we get into those communities to teach them and give them maybe a liaison or something, someone that they can go to? How do we break that cycle?
Well, I mean, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I think we work together to get into those communities. To answer your last question, as far as breaking that cycle and trying to encourage people to report, I have to say that hearing about 1,640 incidents makes me think that more people are reporting right now, which is good. But, and Stephen, maybe you want to speak to the model minority and how to break through that barrier. But there's so many barriers to reporting. First of all, people, when you are confronted with hate in the form of an incident or a crime, sometimes first you don't even believe it. There's so many reactions that victims, targets go through. They don't want to believe that it's happened to them, and then they get angry. Sometimes people are ashamed because they can't. When you're the victim of a hate incident or a hate crime, you're the victim of something that's been directed at you because of something you cannot change. And so you feel really vulnerable and you feel really powerless. And we need to get the message out to people that the power comes in, first of all, recognizing these crimes and recognizing what's going on, reporting them to the proper authorities, law enforcement if you think you're in danger, ADL and OCA and the Minaret Foundation and Houston Coalition Against Hate, all of these groups, if you possibly can, so we know what the trends are. And then we can better address them, we can better educate against them, and we can when it can be a contagion like COVID-19. It maybe not as fast as COVID-19, but when you see one person doing it or you see other people doing it, then you tend to follow. And I think that's part of the key.
Yeah. Stephen, can you elaborate on what she was just talking about? Like, what is the OCA doing? What is the OCA doing in helping Asian Americans to report, or what are some barriers that you've seen in the community, in the Asian American community? Please elaborate for us.
I'm gonna definitely echo the sense of potential shame and almost shock in a way of like, how could this happen to me directly? And then it does happen, and it's a moment where you don't even believe it to have happened in the first place. But in terms of how to, I guess, break through that, especially for folks who are first generation and may not have the resources in hand, or let's say the language capacity to handle, I think for a lot of groups in the Asian American community, making sure that we talk with those folks with cultural competency, making sure that we have people who can speak the language, who understands the culture, because I think a lot of times some of us, especially like the children of, let's say, first generation immigrants, we're just like, just do it. It's not a big deal. This is America. We should do it. But then, I mean, that's like speaking to a wall, because it's not how they were, raised. So it's a way of, I mean, this is also bigger with just all groups, but having a conversation and understanding where they're coming from. So for me, like, because I'm like the son of my parents, I've had conversations with them for forever, and it's like slowly chipping away, and finally it's working. So, close ones who are family or friends who can, understand the culture and understand and speak the language to communicate this effectively would be the best way. In terms of making sure that people who are not, who may be afraid to, I think folks who have the support and courage to share their stories either online or in person would give a vote of confidence that, hey, I've done it. It's scary, I understand, but by sharing my story, not only is this on the minds of people to, make action, but also it can help make other folks feel a little bit more comfortable to share their story. So I think those are two ways of bridging that and making sure that people can really just report anything that happens.
In our community, reporting hate crimes, or just reporting crimes generally speaking, I remember growing up and my parents would just, it's easier to let things go. And it wasn't just in our family, it was most South Asian, or I should say lands where the British, I don't like to blame everything on the British, but they have a huge hand in everything nasty. But in colonialized lands, right, this was part of colonial strategy. Right? Divide and conquer. It was just keep things silent. Don't rock the boat. Don't speak up. Don't have a voice. You're a nobody. We know everything. So when people come to this country and the boat is rocked, it's part of the reason why we never really even talked about Islam until 9/11 hit. Right? It's because we didn't want to rock the boat and create confusion and create any awkwardness. And when I get bullied in school, it's just let it go. It's okay. Who cares if they're calling you X, Y, and Z? It's just, but as you're saying, like second generation, it's like, what the hey, let's speak up, let's talk, let's say something. I wonder if it's the same thing in the Chinese American community because of old school colonialism.
I think there's elements of that with East and Southeast Asian, since our countries also were quite devastated by colonialism as well. But also I think that's inherent to some of just the traditions of the countries there. I will say it's funny that you bring that up, because it reminds me of how that element of how our people behave and the model minority myth was also used and weaponized against Black and Latinx Americans, because at that, I think it was the 70s or 80s, the folks in power were saying, well, these folks, they keep their head down, they don't complain, and look at them. Why can't everyone be like that? So then your comment about dividing and conquering, that's how folks in power have now kind of divided amongst, different communities who aren't in power. And then we sometimes just bicker amongst each other and then don't really look at the real problem at hand. So, yeah.
It was interesting that that someone in DC the other day. And to clarify, Minaret Foundation is a nonpartisan organization. We're a pending C3, so we don't take sides on one party or the other. But it was interesting to hear that our president said that Nancy Pelosi was dancing in the streets of Chinatown. As Amna had mentioned, that was just pretty like clear cut. It's how do we get past that? That's ridiculous, because today might be the Chinese American community. Tomorrow, for sure, it'll be our Jewish brothers and sisters, right? And then it's the African American, the Latinx community, the Muslim community. It's just, it's almost as if it's not like a domino effect, but they're searching for a community here that's going to be vulnerable, distract from their own. We could have dealt with this Corona situation way better than we did, right?
Their own
and to distract from their own faults, we're pinning the blame. It's almost like when I would fall, when I was a kid, if I'd fall or trip or do something, instead of blaming myself, I'd blame it on my sister. Why'd you leave that there? And even today, I'll fall on something, I'll blame it on my son sometimes. Like, why'd you leave your dominoes there, your toys there? But it's really my own fault. I should have watched where I was going. It's almost natural sometimes.
No, but you love your sister and your sons.
Yeah, they're cool.
I don't know if there's love in that heart, in a lot of the hearts out there that have hate in them. So, okay, so that was on a lighter note, but so exactly going back to what y'all are talking about, with what Stephen was saying and with what Sharik was saying, that, in our community as well, like in the Muslim communities, from after 9/11 happened, we were told, be good, be nice, do good things, do extra things, go out there and you'll change people's views on who you are. But that doesn't necessarily always help. And I want to ask you all, when is that time? Because it hit me at maybe like 10 years after 9/11 that, okay, this isn't working and I'm still going to be a good citizen, but I have to start speaking out, right? I have to start saying something, because just giving roses and just handing somebody a rose on the street and showing that, oh, I have a hijab on, they're going to love me, doesn't necessarily work all the time. So give us some ideas and insight on how we can encourage, because I'm a second generation American and I was trained to think that way, right? I was trained to think that, oh, if you're just good, if you're just nice, everybody will start loving you. They'll accept you. And it took me, like, in my heart, I knew that that's not how it's supposed to be, because, I just knew that. But that's what we're taught in Asian American communities and a lot of different, even in the Latinx community and in African American communities, we're taught, okay, just don't rock the boat, just as Sharik was saying. But how do we get people to stand up for what's right? Like, you all do that every day. You're all advocates in the community, on the front lines, on the streets. How do you encourage and how do you excite people to stand up for what's right? And like what Stephen was saying, we're like, why don't you just report it? Why don't you just say it? But how do we get all these different communities to come together, like have a true, and that's why intersectionality is so important, because we are all one and we are all going to be going through the same things. So how do we start standing? How do you want to inspire people to stand up for one another? Any of you can talk about that. Please just jump in. What are some things that y'all are doing as advocates on the streets, on the ground, to inspire people to stand up, and how to bring coalitions together?
Well, I'll start. I mean, for us, there's a lot of educating that needs to happen, and capacity building that needs to happen. When you talked earlier about what might make someone feel comfortable to go report an incident or a crime. I mean, we have a law enforcement committee, which ADL, Deena is co-chairing that committee, and we're building the relationships with law enforcement. They attend our coalition meetings in the hopes that, people will start to feel comfortable to report to them what's happening. Also, we uplift the work that's already being done. So ADL has reporting on their site. They have a heat map. So we encourage people, if it's an incident, it's not a crime, go to ADL, but also report everything to HPD. Just so we can start to document what's occurring and what's happening. And also, if you as an organization leader don't feel comfortable, then let the coalition know, right? Because we will then reach out to ADL, we will reach out to HPD, and we will try to be an intermediary of sorts so that things are being reported. So I think part of the work we're doing, we're doing research on this, what's happening in Houston, what's happening in the state of Texas. Texas Southern University is leading phase 1. University of Houston is leading phase 2. And we're going to use that research so that we know where we need to focus our attention as a coalition. We have a prevention committee that works on educating the public. We have a retreat, an annual retreat for our members so that they can capacity build, so that they can learn how to have dialogue around these really difficult conversations. And we also have one annual event that's open annually. How do you reach people? Like, you don't want to just preach to the choir. So how do you reach everybody else? And I think that's the difficulty of these times is, as Deena mentioned earlier, is we're connecting this way, but really it's like one-on-one human connection, breaking bread together, attending a meeting together and starting a conversation with someone that does not look like you, that you don't know anything about. That's what is going to start to, you know, break some of the issues that we're discussing here. Yeah, that's my piece.
Thanks, Marjorie. Yes, and that's what Minaret Foundation was founded upon. We were founded on breaking those barriers, breaking those divides, and that's why it's so important for all of us to be talking here and discussing this, because and what you just said about law enforcement, a lot of times it is. I'm so happy to know that, you know, somebody can have a liaison of sorts to speak to, because a lot of times it is hard for people to call law enforcement. They're scared, legitimately so. There's so many communities that are affected by law enforcement as well, and we have to bring those communities in the fold as well, to let them know that there are organizations out there are nonprofits out there are coalitions out there that will stand in between you and law enforcement if they have to, because that's so important. Because honestly, even a Muslim American, being a Muslim American, I don't have that. I can never feel what an African American boy will go through by being stopped by law enforcement, but I still get scared. So I can't even imagine what that little boy or that young 16-year-old boy may feel. So that's why it's so important for us to coalition build and have those liaisons. We've talked about this in our DA's committee meeting last week about bringing those liaisons to step in the middle, to be that mediator. So Stephen, you tell me, what are some things that the OCA is doing to inspire people to stand up? What are some things that y'all are doing on the ground to inspire your communities to stand up not just for themselves, but stand up for other marginalized communities that
but I think
after Stephen, I have a question for Marjorie. So after, sorry.
Okay. I think something tangible that has been occurring with different organizations in the Asian American community are these weekly bystander intervention trainings. So a lot of times when you see something happening, you know, you mentioned, you know, is there somebody in between? Well, a lot of times these crimes or hate crimes occur in public, and usually there are other people around. But because again, it's not only shocking for the victim, but shocking to folks around you, many don't know what to do. They're just either they stand there or they walk away or something else. But I think these trainings can really help you assess, okay, I saw the incident. Am I okay with my own safety? If so, then I should be able to put myself in between the victim and the perpetrator. And then from there, you can make an assessment of what to do, whether to just stop it completely or pull out your phone and record, because that usually also helps detract people from doing anything in the public eye. So that's something tangible that you can do in terms of stopping these things. In terms of inspiration, I think something that I go back to is looking at what we've done in the past with history, seeing how different groups have come together for different causes and has caused real positive change. The one that I look to is obviously the 60s civil rights movements. And the reason why I say that is, you know, that movement also cascaded into letting the immigration laws to change to even allow my parents to come to this country in the first place. Because before then, we weren't allowed to come in. And I think understanding how that collective energy and effort to make change, because that movement, yes, led by the Black American community, also had other groups as well. And I think understanding that, how those efforts help all marginalized groups, I think is, for me at least, a very inspirational way of saying, we've done it in the past, we should be doing it now, and we should continue doing it in the future, because that's the only way to make change for all of us. And as a group of our size, like the Asian American community is one of the smaller groups in this country. So we don't have the physical numbers as other groups do. And a lot of times we have to work together with other groups to make things happen. And the first part is to understand our shared history and then work from there.
Yeah, and I do feel like we're going in the right direction. In the past couple of years, I do feel like different diverse communities are coming together to understand that it could be us next. So we have to be with one another. We have to be one. We have to be united, because even if it doesn't happen to us, we have to stick together. And that's why it's so intersectionality. I'm going to say that word over and over again. It's so important. But Sharik was going to ask Marjorie something.
Marjorie, I want to give you a little bit of pushback. I hope you don't mind. So I truly, everything that you said, you know, coalition building, one-on-one capacity building these one-on-one relationships. But, you know, we're seeing a lot of these crazy people hit the masses immediately with their hateful rhetoric, and they're able to, for the lack of a better word, convert people to their cause, right? Or reinforce the mentality of their cause just instantly, without building those relationships, without capacity building, without coalition building. They're just able to get everything done. And it's, you know, why can't we do that? Why? And I love the idea, listen, I love the idea of building one-on-one relationships. And that's great, and that's so important. But is there a place, or is there a way to really do the same thing that these crazies are doing?
Well, so it's interesting you said that, because a lot of what they do, and I have ADL and Deena to thank for this, is it's done online, right? A lot of what they're doing, they're vetting young people online, and they're, like you said, they're transforming. You know, there are a lot of parents who do not have this belief, and then they come to find out sometimes when it's too late that their young person in the house, their mind has been completely transformed. And I think really for me, what the root of all of this is do we love ourselves, right? Do we love ourselves enough so that we can be in a capacity to love the other? Because if you love yourself, there's no way that you can have hate in your heart towards somebody else. So, you know, this is why I said education and information is so key. Having an online presence for us as a coalition was a priority for me, so that we have information that's accessible online, so that when young people are searching hate, you know, maybe they're going to find Houston Coalition Against Hate. Maybe they're going to find ADL, Anti-Defamation League, you know, instead of just finding, you know, a white supremacist website that is trying to convert them into their ideology. So, you know, it's not one or the other. It's yes and. It's like everything. And I think that's what makes this work so difficult. And that's why it's so important that we do it together. One person and one organization cannot tackle what is happening here by themselves. Like, we need each other.
Yeah, money. That's right. That's why we need a coalition.
Yeah.
We already have a coalition.
That wasn't money. I was snapping to her comment.
Oh, you're snapping. Okay. I thought you said money, because money's a big factor. These guys are well funded.
Yeah. We have to diversify funding. That's one of our goals this year. And yeah, it takes money. It takes human power. It takes volunteers. So
I just want to, one last question that I'm going to bring it all together, definitely. But I want to ask Deena, all of you, Marjorie, Stephen. So school's going to start hopefully in September. And then we're going to probably have, you know, the fall's coming. We might have a resurgence of, you know, with the virus, but the kids are going to be back in school as well. And it already started before we got into lockdown here in Houston, because my son goes to a high school and he learns a lot of this racist rhetoric from there. And I've had this conversation at the schools, like what's going on. And I know the ADL and the coalition, Houston Coalition Against Hate, y'all are in the schools, y'all are doing a lot of great work, but those kids, my son is learning this stuff in his school. Like I'm just going to say it. I never learned, just this year, I learned what a wetback was. And that was from my son. So how are we going to, how are we as a coalition, like we have so many different coalitions, different organizations working, but I'm, as a parent and anybody that has younger siblings, like Stephen does. Like, how are we going to protect our children from this? Because it really weighs on my mind, because I see it, and my son will come tell me these things, and I'm like, wow, he just told me, like, the month before we went into lockdown, he had mentioned about Asian American kids being picked on, and he's like, oh, they picked on me too, and they said, oh, you probably brought it because you're a Muslim. But yeah, so he gets picked on a lot, but that's besides the point. But how are we going to, in September, when schools open up, like past 2-3 months we haven't been open, so thankfully, but there could be cyberbullying going on. I know that the schools can't really do much about that right now, but what are we going to do in September? What are we going to do in these schools, in high schools and middle schools? Because it's so prevalent there. I didn't learn that much racism in school when I was growing up. Today is a totally different time.
Question for you. Oh, I'm sorry, Dean. Quick question for you. When your son shared that with you, what did you do?
He told me what it was, and I was like, okay, never say that again. It's like, don't ever say it again. And
Right.
he's like, well, the kids say it, and they all joke about it. It's like a funny thing. It's like, he's like, what's the big deal? And I'm like, I have to sit there and educate him.
Yeah.
These are things you cannot say, because even though he doesn't have hate in his heart, but that's what he was saying. Like, how do they, talking about converting, right? He was talking about converting people to their ideology. Even my little South Asian kid can be converted, like,
Yeah.
he won't be, but because his mom's gonna be on his, like, nagging him nonstop. But still, it's affecting kids that are minorities as well, the minority communities, because they start having those racist stereotypes. Stereotypes are huge. He's like, Mom, every group has a stereotype. Did you know that? And I'm like, seriously, this is what's happening in the schools.
So this is why I think it's important that as parents, we're communicating to our principals and to the teachers and our educators, that we're holding them accountable. ADL has a No Place for Hate program, and Deena can talk more about that. But if we know that that exists, and then something happens in a school, then as a parent, you can say, you know, my son shared this with me. I took the time to educate him, but I'm gonna have to hold this school accountable. Are you all a part of No Place for Hate? Can you look into finding out what you need to do so that you can become a No Place for Hate school? What type of programming are you, assemblies, what type of things are you teaching young people? And really get involved, because the fact is, if we're not involved, then they're gonna go online and they're gonna find information. So we do have to step it up. For those of us, for the young kids who are lucky to have parents, especially at least one parent in the home, it's hard to be that involved sometimes, but if we are not, then what you're saying is gonna keep happening. Go ahead, Deena.
Well, first of all, Marjorie, the check is in the mail. I don't think I've gotten as many good plugs for ADL in as short a period of time ever. So thank you so much. You're right, though, we do have some good programs, but to your point and to Amina's point, a lot of it begins in the home. You can't constantly be monitoring what's going on. You can't constantly be seeing what your children are doing online, but it's important to pay attention to that. It's important to have those conversations, Amina, that you have with your son, because one of the things that makes bullying more prevalent is that children don't necessarily have a trusted adult to report the bullying to. And everybody needs to tell the children in their lives, if you're bullied or you see someone else bullied and you want to talk to someone about it, come talk to me. You'll be safe with me. I'll make sure that you're protected. I'll make sure that you don't get hurt anymore. I'll help you through this situation. Back to some of the resources ADL has, if you go to adl.org and you click on education, we have tons of resources that help not only students themselves, but also teachers. We have tons of lesson plans that are very topical. We have programs for families and caregivers. We have an email that goes out every Tuesday called Connect 3, and each email has 3 different ways, it addresses 3 different groups: students, teachers, and families and caregivers, and talks about certain topics, certain information, resources we have that can help you discuss these things with your children, that can help you prevent the bad things that are happening and can help you address bad things when they do happen. It's a constant battle. And to your point about it wasn't this way when you were going to school, hate goes in waves. It's always kind of there under the surface. Sometimes things magnify it. Certainly COVID-19 has magnified a lot of the problems that we have, including hate. You just have to constantly be aware of it, make it safe for people to report, and address it when it happens.
Definitely, yes. It was subtle when we were growing up, but it was there. It's different now. It's a totally different era that we're living in. And I just want to throw it out there for parents. If you are reaching out to in September when your kid goes back home or goes back to school, make sure you have everything that you say to your principals or your administration in writing. Never talk to them over the phone. Do it in writing, because honestly, I'm going to be honest, a lot of times administration, a lot of the people in there can be racist too. So you got to be careful and have everything in writing, and reach out. If you feel like they're not helping you, reach out to the ADL, reach out to different coalitions, different organizations that can be that mediator, because sometimes you need mediators, you need mediation, even when it comes to your child's school, because people are people. I mean, even no matter how much training they get, you know, a lot of schools in this district are with no place for hate schools, right? But they're not doing the assemblies, they are not doing the things that they need to be doing to be a no place for hate school. So I don't know, we have to figure out before September comes how we're gonna help Asian American kids, especially right now with COVID, how we're gonna help Asian American kids, specifically Southeast Asians, how we're gonna help them, because my son told me so many stories just like within a month, and I'm like, so we have to do something. We got to be those mediators. We have to be those liaisons. So I'm going to try to, Sharik, do you have any other questions that you want to ask?
I have a question for each of you. You know, on what is one way that each of us can inspire others to stand up? But here's a two-part question that I have for everyone. What is one way that we can stand up for everyone during this lockdown? And I know the lockdown is about to be over, but let's see what actually happens. What's one way that we can stand up for one another in this lockdown? And what's one way that we can inspire others to stand up for others, right? Because, you know, as I had mentioned to you all through email, it's, you know, it's easy to go to protests, rallies. That's what we would do before, is protests, rallies. We'd write to our senators, and we can still do some of the stuff that we used to do before. But now we sort of have an opportunity to do a little bit more, especially because everyone's just sitting around at home. A lot of us don't have anything to do, and we have all this technology at our fingertips. I mean, I'm looking at you, Deena. You're probably sitting in Maryland right now, right? Maryland? No, not Maryland. Dang it. Well, let's just say somewhere in Houston.
Right? Inside the loop.
Inside the loop. Okay, inside the loop. And we're getting so much done right now. So my two-part question is, what can we do to inspire? What can we do to stand up for one another right now? And the second is, what can we do to inspire other people?
I think it's exactly what you just said. Stand up for each other. Whenever you see an example, hear an example of some sort of hate or bias, address it. Don't ignore it. Do what you feel comfortable doing, but don't ignore it. And when other people see you do that, then they feel empowered to do the same.
I agree. And I think now is a time where we're going in and we're spending time with our families. So if you can take time to talk to your kids and really take time to see what they're looking at, and also take care of yourself, right? Make sure your mental health is okay. There's virtual therapy apps. You can have a virtual therapy session if you need it. And figure out what's keeping you from healing, if there are traumas, and from loving yourself. And you can also, for action items, you can go to the website HoustonAgainstHate.org. You click that resources tab, and under the tab, there's the civic engagement tab. And there you can make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure if you have to mail in your ballot that you can do that. If you haven't filled out Census 2020 yet, you're home, make sure you do that. And you can also figure out who your congressional representative is, and you can also petition. You can make phone calls, you can write letters. And then once you do that, share it. Share what you've learned, share what you've done with at least one other person to inspire them to also take action.
There's always a friend out there that wants to do something, but doesn't know how to do it. So if for those of us who actually go out and do something, maybe we can identify 2 or 3 or 4 friends on our Facebook or Insta or just in our phone diary and say, you know what, I'm going to share with them how I did it, or create a small WhatsApp group with them and say, hey, you guys go help me out with this, just to break, because honestly, standing up for one another is not hard. I guess it takes a little bit of, it does take courage. It does take courage. It does take the willingness of going against the grain, and I get that. But once you stand up, it's just like, that was it. That's all I had to do to make someone feel comfortable and welcome and loved. I literally just had to stand up and say something. I think just the point from where you think about it to where you actually do it is so big. But after that, it's just like, it just becomes easy.
I think I'm just gonna add a little bit because I agree with everything that's been said. Something else that's simple to do to stand up for one another right now is just maybe a check-in courtesy call with your network to see how they're doing, especially folks who may be more profile these days, because we're all going through anxiety. We're all going through a lot right now. Those folks who are being profiled are going through probably that plus. And I think a general call is just to see, hey, how are you doing? How are you coping? Let's just have a conversation, just to show that, you know, we are there for you. I think that would go a long way. And it's very simple. It's like a 5-minute thing. I know groups also are doing phone banking with their constituents, with their communities, just to check in with them. Not talking about anything else except, hey, we're just here for you. We want to listen because, you know, we want to help you. The other thing in terms of, I guess, starting things themselves, yes, pointing them to people who can get them connected and knows the resources is great. There's also a lot of great guides right now in terms of how to start things, with whether it's like mutual aid funds that's been popping up all over to help communities with money or support, or even just doing some social media / digital advocacy and petitioning, especially with students on campuses when they're not getting as much support. So there's a lot of guides out there, and of course, once they have that, you know, resource, they can really begin to do their work.
Thank you so much.
And from my part, you know, I'm finding, because we're getting to spend a lot more time with our children. Yeah, me and my wife are actively sitting with my son. My daughter's too young, but just talking to him about the beauty of diversity and the beauty of different skin colors and hair types and, you know, languages and foods and cultures, and not talking to him about hate, but talking to him about the beauty of the diversity. And I think that's, if we can empower him to think about this as beautiful rather than as something weird or gross or nasty or something, we don't want to teach him the word other, but just something beautiful, then I think he might be able to inspire his friends to see this as beauty as well. All right, so that's what we're trying to do.
Sorry, I want to ask you a question. What is Minaret doing to inspire others? Like, I know there's so much stuff going on with us. We are doing as much as we can, but I want you to elaborate on that as well. I want you to talk about what Minaret has been doing to help.
Our focus is multi-faith and civic engagement. So in that capacity, what we like to do is bridge the gap and sit on the intersection of relationships between the Muslim community and other faith communities, but also governmental entities as well. And we find that when we're able to bring the Muslim community out from sometimes the bubble that we're living in, because many of our community are still first generation, and the second generation, it doesn't really understand how, you know, I didn't really understand how government worked, even though I learned about it in US history and everything else. But when we can bring the Muslim community out and meet everyone else and give them an understanding of what our Latino brothers and sisters are going through with kids in cages, or our African-American brothers and sisters are going through with systemic discrimination, or our Jewish brothers and sisters have always gone through, right? With anti-Semitism, and now what our friends from Southeast Asia, especially immigrants and second generation and third generation, and frankly, I mean, Chinese Americans have been here since what, the late 1700s, early 1800s, founding of California, right? So it's just creating awareness and education. That's what we're focused on right now.
I want to also point back to what Marjorie said before about breaking bread. I think, having these honest conversations with a very diverse group of people over something as simple as food is a good way to literally break the ice and have a setting where it's very comfortable for everyone to just really listen with one another. I know that's efforts that we've tried to do before and we will try to continue to do, and I hope that's something us and other groups will continue to do as well.
Awesome.
Well,
Yes.
I'd like to add also to that. So hoping to be able to do something called civic dinners in collaboration with them. But Interfaith Ministries also has dinner dialogues. The Young Center has plenty of resources virtually right now. And so I would encourage folks to go to the website and look at the member resource manual and start to see who the members are and what their offerings are and what their resources are.
Thanks so much, Marjorie. And that's what.
And a nice plug, by the way, for if you follow Houston Coalition Against Hate on Facebook. I don't know if it's like this on Instagram, but on Facebook, you guys are always highlighting what your member organizations are working on, especially when it comes to this.
Yes, we're doing that on all our platforms. So on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, we're here to uplift the work that's being done, and then to supplement where we need to, but to uplift what's being done.
And what you were talking about, Marjorie, the dinner dialogues with Interfaith Ministries and stuff. And, Minaret Foundation has been doing that with, we have the Muslim Jewish Christmas. Well, and we did that in December. We've been doing that for almost I don't know, Sharik would know exactly how many years?
10 years.
10 years. It's amazing work. And now we could probably, hopefully, expand it and to include more communities. But we actually, I think the theme behind it was that we're really not doing anything on Christmas, so let's get together and break some bread. But that's the whole point of Minaret as well. So I hope you give us a shout out as well, Marjorie.
Oh, well, I'm looking to get Minaret.
I hope, because we're trying to break those barriers as well.
Keep joining us in the work. Yeah.
Because the work it's never ending and we have to keep doing it. And that's why it's so important for all of these organizations that are here today, Minaret, ADL, OCA, and the Houston Coalition Against Hate. We're all together in this, and there's so many other organizations out there that we have to coalition build with, and it's important right now. So I'm gonna try to tie this all in. If y'all, I want you all, starting with Sharik, to just kind of give a message, a closing message for everyone, what you want everyone to leave this webinar with, and just tell us what's in your heart and how we can be inspired, and how others can be inspired with the work that y'all are doing.
My message is going to be very simple, and it goes along with what I was saying earlier. If you agree with everything that myself, Stephen, Marjorie, Amna, and Deena, and others within the coalition and other groups are saying in regards to hate and scapegoats and standing for one another, if you agree with it, do two things. One, identify one way that you can stand up for someone, even if it's just by sending a Facebook message or an Insta message or a text message. Just even if it's not picking up a phone call, picking up the phone, making a call, just at least send one message and say, hey, just checking in. As Stephen was saying, how are you doing? That's one. And the second thing is, if you like the feeling that you get when you check in on someone or when you stand up for someone, if you like that feeling, embrace the hell out of it. Embrace the heck out of it. Embrace the heck out of it and spread it to at least one or two people and infect them with this joy as well.
Thanks so much, Sharik. I love it. Okay. Deena, go ahead. Please leave us with your inspiring words.
Well, I pretty much what he said, what Sharik said, one of the things I love that Sharik has said in the past, I heard on the Muslim Jewish Christmas, which was, to stand up against hate. And if you don't have to be the first person to stand up against a hate incident or hate, be the second person, make that a contagion. We're living in a time where we are fighting a dangerous virus. We don't need the virus of hate to make it more difficult. So we all need to work together and speak out and stand up. Pretty much what he said.
Yeah. Stephen, I know you're always out there helping people when you're at rallies. That's how we met, actually. So please tell us how you want to inspire, because I'm so inspired by your work. So I know that there's so many others that you can inspire. Please.
I think for me, it's related to what both Sharik and Deena have said, but just really exposing yourself. I think a lot of us do have those preconceived notions about people or groups, and the best way to really demystify or debunk all that is just to expose yourself to all different groups of people. Just go out and try and meet as many people as you can, listen to them, like basically shut up and listen to them talk and hear their side, hear their story. And that way, I'm pretty sure you'll find something in common with them that will motivate you to support them and their community, hopefully down the road, and vice versa when you share your side. I think that's something for us in the Asian American community. When we were looking for allyship, we also need to look internally and see, what can we do when we all mentioned the next time, and it's going to happen the next time for other groups, knowing that we've been the victims this occurrence. Other groups are going to be the victims in the next occurrence. If we're receiving allyship and help, we have to return that moving forward as well. So expose yourself. And I think Houston is such a great place for that. We have so many different groups of people who speak so many different languages from so many different faiths. And yes, it takes an hour to drive through Houston, but we all bear through it. So you can make it through and meet up the people where they are and have that conversation and be open to it. So that's my message.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you. Marjorie, please. I totally agree with you, Stephen, too. I'm so proud of the fact that, whenever we're at these rallies and these protests and stuff, it's such a diverse group of people, and it's so beautiful. That's why I love Houston. I've only been here for 6 years, but I love it. Marjorie.
I second, third, fourth, all of that. I'll leave you with take care of yourselves. Because if those of us who are doing the work are not okay, then the work will be halted. So take care of yourselves. You do not have to go at the rate that colonialism has taught us that we need to go at. Rest, be healthy, and we're still dealing with this years later. So the reality of there's no quick answer, there's not going to be a fast fix, and to just sit with the discomfort of that and take care of yourselves so that you can keep doing the work that you're doing.
Thanks so much, everyone. I'm so happy that you are all here and all of these organizations are doing things together. So Sharik, I'm going to, I think this is a good time for us to let it end. Y'all gave us such a good closing messages, and I want everyone to take that to heart. It was so nice seeing you all. I'm so glad. This actually gives me so much, I love seeing people. I'm an extrovert, so it's so happy. I'm so happy I could see you all. But thank you so much. If y'all have any questions, anybody that's watching, if you have any questions about what one of our panelists have said, please reach out to Minaret Foundation. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. We are doing a lot of great work with different organizations. Please give us a shout out, message us, and we will be there for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.